The proclamation by the country's eighth most important citizen and leader of government business can easily be spurned. After all, the appointing authority, President Museveni, said in his June 2021 State of the Nation address that his current cabinet is full of fishermen. On the other hand, the proclamation could be interpreted to mean that the January 2026 presidential election, in which President Museveni is up for seventh elective term against 7 contenders, is a far-gone conclusion.
Is a mere change of guards.
Upon shooting to power 39 years ago, the president first ruled for 10 years without elections. He offered himself for the first polls under the new constitution in 1996 and won with 72% of the valid votes cast. He went on to win elections in 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016 and 2021, albeit with a drop in margins. All elections since 2001 have been marked by the omnipresent role of the country's military apparatus. There are about a dozen security agencies carved out of police and the army, the notable ones being the Defense Intelligence and Security, formerly CMI, Joint Anti-Terrorism Task Force, Internal Security Organization, Special Forces Command, Director of Crime Intelligence, among others. However, even as general crime festers across the country, there is no corresponding response by security compared to the military presence, especially during election campaigns. Amid the kidnap and disappearance of opposition supporters, police, which are charged with everyday law and order, often feigns ignorance, while the command structure of the rogue security personnel remains opaque. Uganda's history of violence is sanctly captured in the preamble of the 1995 Constitution, but such acts continue to stain the conscience of the nation.
So the army has played an abnormally bigger role in the politics of Uganda, which it should not. And the other provision has been about a clean government. We had hoped that Uganda would be ruled by a democratically elected government based on the will of the people, that would be having good governance, which includes clean government. But as you can see now,
me and I suspect many others, it is not so much a post-mortem. The patient is dead or dying. It is really rethinking already ahead as to how a new constitution might look like, what kind of significant reforms would have to happen with the constitutional structure, what kind of state structure would be required, what kind of... So it's, for all intents and purposes, if you talk about a CDF who has people in their basement, that's not a state structure. That's not a state structure you can engage with. That's a rogue state. That is a criminal state. It's a criminal gang with state power. You can't have a conversation with a CDF who tortures people and life tweets it, and the judiciary that validates that and actually becomes co-opted in either continuing that imprisonment or a parliament that cannot stop that.
National dialogue is a moment of truth-telling, but it is not an end in itself. It is what you do with it. The commitments that follow that process of truth-telling. And I think that that is the only way in which you can turn the page in this country. If you don't acknowledge my pain and commit to doing something about it, why wouldn't I seek revenge if I came to power?
After promulgation of the Constitution on October 8, 1995, Ugandans saw it as a golden opportunity, a safeguard to many of the country's old problems and injustices, from state-sponsored violence, tribalism, nepotism, egregious human rights abuses, impunity by security agencies, name it. Public views about security agencies to the Constitutional Commission were so harsh that the team led by Justice Benjamin Odochi recommended some of their demands be dropped or toned down. Constituent Assembly delegates agreed with Uganda Constitutional Commission recommendations that shape Chapter 12 on defense and national security. The Constitution put key requirements for all those security agencies that they should be under civilian authority, nationalistic, patriotic and disciplined. Members of each security agency were to be recruited from each district of Uganda. For benefit of doubt, the framers of the Constitution emphasized in Article 221 of the Constitution that security organizations shall observe human rights. As Museveni extends his grip on power and as the Constitution, his government midwifed, turns 30 years next week on Wednesday, there is a general consensus that the country has slid back to the past on many fronts. From the state-sponsored violence, impunity by security agencies and human rights abuses, dysfunctional institutions including public service, tribalism, nepotism, name it, the country is deeply divided and at the best held together by the barrel of the gun.
What I talk about is transitional justice. When a particular community, political community, has been under a hostile situation for a very long time, when that hostile situation ends, it's not business as usual, because you have bodies that are so tainted that they have to go through a cleansing process. That's what shall have go through. Parliament resolves itself because it's every 5 years. Executive also has resolved itself because evidently you need a new executive, etc. But the major challenge will be how to reconstitute Uganda, broadly speaking, how to cleanse a generation of Ugandans who have grown up thinking that corruption is not only natural, but in some cases a duty.
Not going to cry over spilled milk. Kategaya is not going to come back. All these other leaders who were part of the NRM struggle, many of them are dead. They are not going to come back. But we must now think of how these blocks I'm talking about can trust each other. I told you it wasn't a joke. We are going to have a block galvanizing around NRM, and then the block of the so-called regime change fundamentalists. By one means or another, they will have to become less toxic so that they can trust each other the way in Ghana you had a party which galvanized around Jerry Rawlings' party and became the NDC. Then you had the New Patriotic Party, NPP, which also emerged. And the two parties can rule alternately without threatening each other.
Scholars and critics say there is a need for a new consensus. Term limits that were locked in to ensure that a president rules for only 2 terms were purged 20 years ago. With executive overreach, there is hardly a parliament to speak about, while the judiciary is at crossroads as evidenced by the continued keeping of political activists in prison. Poverty, social injustices, and income inequality are grim. On the whole, the national budget has grown in scope and size to 72 trillion shillings currently, amid fiscal indiscipline, bloated administration, endemic corruption, which is the jet fuel of the clientele patronage system, and poor budget execution. This has constipated service delivery across the country, manifested through, among others, crumbling roads, while cancer patients travel long distances to sleep on the floors of Uganda Cancer Institute. The Justice and Constitutional Affairs Minister, Norbert Mao, concurred that there is some soul-searching to do.
I believe that in Uganda, 2026 is a defining moment, and the debate over iPod and constructive engagement is forcing people to drop off any pretense. So don't be surprised when you see us sitting together in the iPod summit, and then the other group also organizing, so that we can promote tolerance.
The right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association, provided for in Chapter 4 of the Constitution, if for political reasons or to express discontentment with government, is gagged by the Public Order Management Act or selectively applies, such as in the case of police escorting supporters of the loose Patriotic League of Uganda to protest outside the German embassy in July. While peace and security is the NRM's unique selling point, the army and intelligence outfits are commanded at the whims of the commander-in-chief, which has also led to critics to believe that even in the event of the incumbent losing elections, peaceful change of power is impossible. The country ranks poorly in governance, at 49% out of 100, according to the latest Mo Ibrahim Index of African Governance. Politics is the most lucrative business, while professionals like doctors are paid a pittance. The political transition is uncertain, while the president's son, who is the chief of the defense forces, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, is boastful as the heir apparent. The president skirts the transition question at every juncture.
Be a need. So for me, actually, the constitution now is more or less where it's on life support or sustaining it. It has its uses. There's the doctrine of necessity. that was used in the case of Mazimbabuto versus Landabak after Ian Smith's unilateral declaration of independence in Rhodesia. The judges of the Privy Council, basically, there's a judge who talked about the idea of necessity is when someone has taken over government, he has overthrown the constitution, you still have to recognize certain actions. People will still get married. So you need to recognize the state to give you a license, land titles, road licenses, students graduating. So there are certain acts of the state you have to recognize for as long as the person is in power. And that's actually in Article 3 of the Constitution says, if the Constitution is overthrown, yes, you have to certain actions, but at some point the Constitution has to be re-established. Now this Constitution itself has already been overthrown in its critical core components.
Whether it is time for a new consensus depends on the current situation, as consensus is needed when existing understandings or directions are unclear, fragmented, or insufficient to address prevailing challenges.